And before I forget this, I cannot forget this, and I keep forgetting it. I forgot it for a long time now, but I just remembered it yesterday. Then I forgot it again. I just remembered it right just now. Well, I don't know that I had time to forget it, but um, so Gage told me that he went back to the house that Jason Oberg guy was 86 at, either Jason or Luke or one of them, but I'm pretty sure it was Jason, said that he acted for a second like he was going to be moving out of the apartments near me, which whenever they were like harassing me and setting everyone up in my building and everything, like all the bad shit was going on, Gage lived in that same building. And then all of a sudden he said that he was going to move to this house, right? And they loaded a bunch of stuff up into a truck, and he went and they acted like they were about to rent the house. And then he came back, and they brought all their stuff back, and he said that that was the house where Josh was MDK'd, and that he pulled back the carpet and he did something, and then he said that he decided that he didn't want to rent the place after all, and then they left and came back to Cambridge Heights, where he has been just like running the place ever since. Like, this dude used to put his own personal little surveillance cameras up around my apartment and around certain other women's apartments and on people's on two different buildings. As far as I saw it, he probably put them on other buildings too, but they were using drones to pass stuff and messages back and forth to each other from one building to another. They were attaching little messages and stuff, and they would fly it over to the other person's balcony, and they could even fly it into their apartment and stuff. And that was a way that they were doing back and forth without people knowing about it. And then Gage had his own little cameras up everywhere, and they had them pointed at my apartment. He would literally come out, look right at me, and be talking on the phone to whoever he was telling. But he would be like, yeah, she's back, or he'd be like, oh, she's leaving now. And he would just be like right out in the open about it, just loud and clear. He'd be like, yeah, she just pulled in. Okay, yeah, she's walking down the sidewalk. She's walking up the stairs now. All right, she's unlocking her door. She's going in now. Like, he would make it super obvious. And I tried over and over again to have them make a different key for me, but they would not, and it wouldn't have mattered even if they had. At one point, I even went in and talked to a maintenance man that I didn't know and asked him if he could please help me get a new key for my apartment, and to not let Gage know that I was trying to get a new key, and to not really like to just go about doing this without letting people know. Like, can I just please get an actual key? Like, or can I get my apartment locked up somehow without these people having a way to? The dude just didn't even know how to respond to that. But like, his mom anyways, there's a lot more foul things that I can say about what was going on there, like as far as sex trafficking and trafficking people and shit like that. And they also had paths cut and certain paths blocked off. They have like certain areas in the woods blocked off, and then paths cut to the highway. They had paths cut through the fence. He used the camera system. One time I watched them use the camera system to steal a bike from JW Champ, while JW was up there. And JW like asked him, he was like, oh yeah, Gage has those cameras, you know what I mean? And he asked Gage to review the cameras. And Gage was like, oh man, it doesn't show anything on the cameras, like whoever took it must have taken it the other way, or he said something like that the cameras didn't pick it up, or it wasn't aimed in the right place, or I can't remember what the excuse was or whatever, but whatever it was, I was able to tell JW what word for word how Gage was going to respond to him, and the result of him asking about his bike, that he wasn't going to find out who took his bike. These were cameras that he had purchased himself and just put up by his own accord. I'm pretty sure that he didn't have permission to do that. And like also Amanda, who runs the show over there, she stole a $700 rent check from me. And then they had a chick named Brandy who works for Mountain Cap cover it, hurry up and cover my rent. And then they took over and began to pay my rent for me instead of me paying my rent like the way that I had been forced to up until then. The moment that Amanda stole that $700 rent check, she was immediately able to get Brandy to cover her butt, and Brandy began to use Mountain Cap to pay for my rent. And all of a sudden I didn't have to pay my rent anymore for a second, which was really weird. And I'm pretty sure that Amanda is also in part responsible for what happened to a girl named Tristonia or something like that. I always say her name wrong. I'm so sorry about that. She used to be in my recovery group that they forced me to go to, like years after I learned how to stop using on my own without anyone else's help, because no one would let me go to a rehab. Like I even asked my family back then if they would send me to a rehab, and they said no. I couldn't get any help. They blocked me when I tried to go to AA classes and stuff like that, and had the AA people trying to set me up. I hadn't even gone to the class yet. They were just trying to set me up on the phone and stuff. Like it was ridiculous. So it was like I was blocked in those ways. But they set that girl up to get overdosed, and then when she didn't die all the way, they set her up to get beat to on the side of the road, and like off they had her pulled out of a side-by-side and just pummeled until they, you know what I mean, until she was, you know what I mean. And I went to that girl's funeral, and that was a pretty messed up thing. She was only like 19 or 20 or something like that. She was pretty young, and they were able to just get her to have a baby, and then they set her up to have the baby taken away, and then they got rid of her. So it's the same weird CPS scam, scandal, trafficking, murder, like getting rid of the parents so that you can have their kids and do what you want with their kids and send their kids to, you know what I mean, places that if the parents had a chance to speak up, they could probably tell you horror stories about that place or whoever that is. Or, you know what I mean? It could just be somebody just completely at random who even, you know, it could actually be somebody who selected and targeted the parents. They could have, you know, used social media accounts like a brochure, picked out the kids that they wanted, and then just had the parents targeted. I mean, it's easy. It could be easy just for somebody to do like that as well. But, you know, Amanda and Gage are both guilty of some pretty serious stuff. I am going to not talk about what they allowed. Well, I will say this, that they let a lot of people who didn't need keys to the laundromat suddenly have keys to the laundromat. They were letting people gather in the rooms that are basically for the maintenance guys. And there were only two maintenance guys, so the one only had to worry about the other one finding out what was going on. They could use these rooms for whatever they wanted on the side, and then they would go into people's apartments and do things to change stuff around. They might replace stuff while you're gone. They might, they were going into my apartment and doing an awful lot, and they made a lot of alterations while I wasn't there. And I'm pretty sure that they were adding and removing cameras and adjusting cameras in my apartment the same way that they were adding, removing, and adjusting them outside of the apartment, which they were doing right out in the open. Plenty of people saw the cameras, and all of it is linked back to their cell phones. So that was rough. And then suddenly the paths that we had up on the mountains were all blocked off, and there was all these trees and stuff blocked off. And then there were other paths cut to the interstate, which is something that there was a reason why we had a gate there, and it made it to where basically anyone could be taken in and out of Cambridge Heights and, potentially in the dark just walk across that field and get in a car and, be taken or be brought in from the interstate. And, people can laugh about how that's not a big deal. It's absolutely a big deal, especially an area that people think is separated in a certain way, and that the only way to get through, that people get through is underneath that bridge or whatever. And I think that there were a couple cameras up on the front building, and that was what everybody was trying to get around. If there were extra people in and out that they didn't want everyone knowing about, that would be why, or if they, and there were certain people that needed, more VIP access in and out of the place. So they would, had cut the fence and all, which Amanda made a big deal about at first. When I first moved in, she was talking about how they should not be cutting the fences, how that was like a big, a bad thing. And then whenever she was pulled more into the stuff, I guess she began to allow all kinds of stuff to happen. She allowed so much. They robbed me of everything I had before I was even supposed to be out of the apartment officially. They came in, they stole everything that had just been bought for my daughter for school. Brand new school supplies, brand new school, everything, school clothes, Adidas shoes, everything. It was Gage and them. They were the only ones who had access to the place. They came in and stole everything I had. They stole the food out of my freezer. It was ridiculous. And it would have been JW and Gage doing all that. And they worked all together and did some pretty heinous, terrible things while my kids and I were in that apartment. I had just quit my job as a manager at Pizza Hut, and was taking classes with Celebrate Recovery to become a recovery coach. And basically what was orchestrated around me was so obnoxious and heinous and terrible that I would actually have to take my very youngest kid and run with him. I would be literally pushed out of, they literally pushed me out of my own apartment. Like, things got so bad towards the end that I was calling the police over here to please make rounds through Cambridge Heights through the evening and stuff like that, just at the slight chance that I might that they might catch somebody actually out there doing something weird, or somebody like Gage taking kids back and forth across from the apartments and stuff. I just didn't understand why kids had to be accompanied, like kids who look like they're strung out and sad and scared and stuff like that. Teenagers who don't even live in this building are being walked back and forth, and it seems like Gage is the one accompanying them, and then there were 3 people who lived across the hall from me, and the little chickie's boyfriend was over sometimes, so it was basically 4 people, but the 3 people lived there as far as the family went. Well, they ended up getting in a fight with Gage and all of them, or Mary, or whatever, who ends up being not good, Mary. Not good at all. And something about illegal pornography and stuff, and illegal and that they got in a fight with them, and then within like just 2 or 3 days, they were gone. Them and everything out of their house. Like, I didn't see moving trucks. I didn't see anybody. And that was whenever I always slept at night. You know what I mean? Like, I'm pretty big at getting sleep at night. I'm really not like the other crackheads. You know what I mean? Like, my sleep is really important. My health is really important, and I'm not going to be healthy every day. And, 100% or even nearly 100% if I don't get enough rest. So my rest is really important anyways. It was like they were just gone. They and everything that was theirs was just gone. And then that apartment across from me remained open for Gage and JW and everybody else to use for other nefarious purposes. And that went on for months. They used that apartment and it remained empty for them to use however they wanted for months. The apartment above me, they were letting apparently my siblings stay in behind my back. My siblings, family members, people who were supposed to be basically stalking me. And these cameras that were in my apartment were basically, that feed was going to the people who were in the apartment above me. And I knew that whoever was above me was supposed to be there just stalking me, just watching me, just affecting me, sending people to me, just like there were other apartment complexes that I lived in where people did the same thing. They would be right beside me or right above me or, you know what I mean, below me too, wherever, however they could. Even up in attics, like listening to me or making noises and doing weird shit. And this has just gone on forever. It's just, people have turned it into their own entertainment and everything. And, you would think that after just, that people maybe after knowing what kind of life somebody had lived and that somebody was basically treated like a slave and that somebody was basically a slave, you would think that over the course of time that eventually people would be like, all right, let's let this person go. And, here's a younger, funner person to, you know what I mean, badger and mess around with. Not that I necessarily want anybody to just, you know what I mean? Not that I want, because I've heard that because they can't get me along the way that they're, that they're doing things to children. They've hurt and MDK'd all these children, all these people, that they had an 18-person sacrifice, 6 men, 6 women, and 6 children, and that they were just brutalized and essayed to death, basically. And anything like that they do, I'm pretty sure they live stream that. And even getting a lot of these people who are supposed to be initiates into these different gangs, cults, groups, organizations, covens, shit like that. Getting them to do this kind of shit to people that they maybe don't necessarily agree with or even want to do, but they're told that they're going to get something out of it in the long run. And then, they don't really get whatever it was out of it in the long run. So, and I guess this just goes on and on and on. It's this terrible cycle of animals and people and time and energy, resources, money, all these things being sacrificed so that people can try to, damage me in my life or replace me with some dumbass broad. Anyways, it's fucking hella aggravating, hella irritating. I don't even know all the players in the game. I haven't even seen all their faces. I just know that I just have to keep pressing forward and outlive and outlast everybody and, try to maintain as much health as I can along the way. And that, if anything happens to me, then there will be no one to speak up for a lot of people, because I would have been the only person to care and speak up for any of those people. So it's kind of like, oh, we got to take her out, and then we're going to be able to get all those people too. And so, if I pass away, it's not just me that passes away. It ends up being over at least 5 people, but potentially more. So that's kind of a weird thing. But anyways, the things that Gage and JW and Amanda did to me and allowed to happen, and just the ways that and they also did this to other women. They were doing this same weird stuff to other women in that back building. And they had this oil weird shit that they did. They had it all over the wood deck and the stairs, and just all over everything. And there were the guys and a couple of the girls, but mostly the guys all worked together to just destroy these women's lives and keep them completely isolated, and record everything that was happening to them in there. And I know at least one of those gals, and that she was a victim, and she lost even her kids over what they did to her back there, just like they were trying to do with me, and they apparently did with all the girls in that back building. Who knows how many chicks that they did it to in Cambridge Heights all at once. But it'll be a wave like that of people that these traffickers will, pick out, and then, they'll record all of this torment and all of this craziness being done to them, and, record them while they're taking showers, and, have their kids recorded while they're getting undressed. And I'm pretty sure that they even had a camera in my daughter's room, and she was a teenager. And, they definitely did a lot. They did worse than that. Like I said, there's a lot of things that I'm not mentioning here. There's the people across the hall. I ended up walking out on the interstate right where they cut the fence, and they have like a path that they take. And if you actually follow that path, which is a path that they used to take to Wilkie's, but now it's just the path it comes right down, drops right down at the Trade Center. You could see 3 spots on the interstate where, they were long enough to be bodies. Just those 3 weird spots where the asphalt was new and different. And they, that was another thing that they were doing was, as soon as you go into Cambridge Heights, you can look down right in front of the office, see this big old cement spot in the ground. It's way bigger now than it was before. And that's where they'll pull up these pieces of asphalt. And then over in front between Cambridge Heights and the Trade Center, there's this little tiny graveyard where they were going and busting up those gravestones, and they were taking the stone from the gravestone and the asphalt, and they were basically cutting out other areas and then using that to cover it in and seal it in. And then it looks like they did such a bad job being crackheads with it that over the course of time, that hole just got big. They were just pulling more and more out of it, and now it's this big, thing that they had to cover and cement. And I didn't go look at the other spots. Where I knew that they had begun to chisel out. There's at least 2 other spots that I know of throughout there that they were chiseling and cutting that asphalt out of the ground and stuff like that. And it only happened while those 2 were there. You know what I mean? It was like as soon as they were there and they joined forces, they were able to. And then there were other sets of people in there who they were working with too, to like destroy and exploit and abuse and have people targeted and their kids taken away, and have people poisoned and set up to be hurt in so many different ways, or to become disabled and all these other things. But Gage definitely spent more personal time in my apartments than he let on, and I could tell. And then also they were able to, like, if I knew that any of them were lying to me and I spoke about that out loud in my apartments, they could then hear, you know what I mean? Anything that I said about any of them, whether I was talking about my, apartment manager, or, I could get off the phone with them, and, whatever I said afterwards, they could hear anything that I said. They were watching everything I was doing. And that's, I guess, gone on for years. And I, like a lot of people, when I'm by myself, I will walk around in, my undies, or potentially even less, is how I used to be, and how I was a little bit of a nudist. People knew that. I would get home from work and rip all my clothes off, and, I might walk around in the nude for a second. And as weird as that might sound to some people, or funny as that might sound to some people, that's what a lot of people do. I know there's got to be other people that do that same thing. Just get home and just rip everything off. And you either go straight to the shower, you might stop at the kitchen first, you might, you know what I mean? But smoke one first, who knows? But they were apparently able to make money off of the fact that I was just like walking around naked, chilling in my apartment and stuff. There didn't even have to be, especially during the time frame whenever I was rejecting everybody, not letting anybody into my apartment, and not letting anyone into my life, keeping my nose clean, finding ways to entertain myself without, anybody else, and, not using or drinking or anything like that. I did really well, and I spent that time to myself, and people were still able to use that to their advantage and exploit me even then. So, this is a pretty sick, messed up situation, and it's super messed up that they are still allowed to manage that place. It's severely messed up that they're still running it. They're traffickers. And then again, I don't, and that's the thing about Josh Oberg. Like, I don't know why he went there. He said he pulled up the carpet. He basically spoke too much. He said too much in front of me. He did something. There's maybe something that investigators missed involving the Josh Oberg case, and Gage had to go back there and clean it up, or get rid of whatever evidence that it was. And then I guess put the carpet back, and then came back to Cambridge Heights and continued to stay there. And then, after they'd run me out of town with human sacrifices, and I was still having to come back and forth to my apartment every couple weeks or whatever, every other week, because I still had 50-50 custody of one of my kids, which was also a setup to keep me stuck in town, or and coming back and forth or whatever. But as I was coming back and forth, like every time that I would show up, he would stand out there. There was a time whenever I showed up with a few frenemies, and we started to collect, the contents of my apartment. Well, Gage was really upset about that, because, to them, whatever's left behind is theirs. And so he stood outside on the phone, talking about us, talking about everything that we were doing. Oh yeah, this person's coming down with boxes. Oh, they're putting it in the back of he stood out there for hours talking about us right in front of us. And even the people who came with me, even though they were bad guys too, they were like super unnerved. They were like really freaked out by him doing that, even though they were all bad guys. You know what I mean? And that's something that I've seen a lot, is bad guys working against me, and there being other bad guys either for the same team or other teams, and that they end up clashing, or they end up like canceling each other out because they're both just so dumb. But anyways, so that's a little bit more for today. And I'm going to get back in here, and I need to take a shower and stuff because I spent all morning cleaning. I woke up and it was nice and cool, and I had the energy to clean, and I cleaned and cleaned. I saw a need and I met a need. Even if it was a setup, I still met the need, and I accomplished my mission within 4 hours, and now I get to hopefully I got a place that I can stay the night once in a while that is in a little better condition than it was whenever I showed up, which is not the fault entirely of the person who actually where I am, because he is just freshly disabled and in a pretty severe way, and is trying not to get in trouble, and things are really weird. Anyways, slightly, but I'm not trying to. I understand that shit gets fucked up sometimes, and if I can fucking help out, and I feel that it's even if whether it's in an innocent issue or not, if some needs that I see, I feel the urge to meet right away and to try to solve right away, and that's just how it is. I do not help out a lot. I go out of my way to not help in a lot of situations, because everywhere I go, I know that everyone is my enemy, and I try not to help my enemies. And I also felt God tell me not to help my enemies and not to forgive my enemies yet. That he said, when my enemies receive consequences, and they're actually suffering and in pain and in prison, or going through whatever consequences that they're going through, and they're begging him for forgiveness and asking for forgiveness, at that point, I can forgive them. But he says, until they face consequences, you don't need to forgive them. That's stupid. He's like, they've done this to you, 700 million times. It's time for them to actually receive consequences for this. They're actually being cruel, malicious, just disgusting. And they really do need to receive punishment and consequences for what they've done. And if they don't receive those consequences, they will lose their eternal souls. Like, they will be cast into the lake of fire. Like, sorry to get biblical with you guys, but there are some things that you actually have to receive consequences for, because if you don't receive them on this plane in this world, they will make sure that you get what you deserve in the next. And they're going to try to make sure that you get what you deserve in this one. And if that means that universe has to send demons into your life and absolutely destroy your life, that is what universe will do. If you don't receive the consequences that are due to you properly, you're going to get demons, you're going to get darkness, you're going to get deception, you're going to get all kinds of nasty things. And then you're probably going to get the punishment that you deserved all along on top of that. And then you may even get even worse consequences than all of that, just because you're so stubborn and your heart is so dark, and you still need so much work. And I've heard that only the most innocent part of our spirit goes to heaven. And I don't know if that's true or not, but the idea is that evil and darkness can't enter heaven. It can't enter the heavenly celestial, paradise realm. And that if you are mostly evil and you only have a little tiny bit of good, a little tiny shred of innocence in you, then only this much of you goes to paradise and the rest is lost. So basically you go to paradise as a little infant spirit who, didn't really develop very much. Or I'm a toddler in spirit. I didn't really develop very, very much. I'm still throwing fits, or I'm just a child in spirit. No one has nurtured me, and I haven't learned self-care, and this is who I am in the spirit. Like, there's, what I mean? And it upgrades, you can go up to a very high rank. You can become such a high-ranking spirit that your spirit is stronger than your own flesh and blood, and that your spirit can even connect to other spirit spheres out there. Anyways, sorry to mix the supernatural and spiritual in with the legal talk and the personal experience talk, but it does all go together. The Bible says, delight yourself in God's laws and the law of God. And there really is something about law and order. Like, there really is something about things being orderly and people, actually going by some kind of order, having some kind of, without that order, there is ultimately the possibility of just complete and total anarchy. And if you want anarchy, then you're not going to be able to have any of this. You're not going to be able to have any of this beauty or splendor. It's not going to be available for you anymore. So, anyways, just a little bit more stuff about stuff, information, and how things are complicated here in the big old town of Buckhannon, West Virginia, and some crooked things that need straightened out.